Hello, I'm Jennifer Harriger from SPEP Intensive. Today I will be giving an instructional video on the topic of student engagement in the intensive classroom. This will consist of different concepts and methods for encouraging your students to participate in discussion with confidence. Participation and general interest of the students is probably one of the most important aspects of a successful class. Ideally, as teachers, we would have a room full of enthusiastic students who are engrossed in the topic and are always ready to volunteer. However, this is not always the case. Students can be unpredictably tired, uninterested, or confused at any time. So teachers have to be prepared to overcome these obstacles. So the initial question that we ask ourselves is how? Naturally, the response is to ask questions. It seems to be the obvious way to engage a class and make them think about the topic at hand. Logically, the subsequent question would be, what do we ask? However, this can be a challenging task. So, my task here today is to help you understand what you can do to enhance student engagement in the classroom. The three educational methods I would like to talk about today are fostering competence, avoiding cognitive overload, and cultivating meaningful questions. Ideally, there would be an easy step-by-step tutorial to guide instructors through the correct way of generating student engagement. Unfortunately, it's not that straightforward. It's an unpredictable path that could have innumerable ways to get to the ending point, as well as countless results when you finally get there. Each class and each individual student presents a different circumstance that slightly changes the way that teachers reach that ending point. In my own personal experience, I had two general methods to overcome these obstacles. In the case of disinterest, I would try to relate the topic of the activity to the student in any way possible. Initially, if a student insisted that they could not complete an activity or question, my question would be why. What I didn't do was ask thought-provoking questions to encourage the student to think outside of the box. Typically, my second method for the case of demotivation was verbal encouragement. However, in my experience, this strategy only goes so far. Before long, students begin to doubt whether the compliments are sincere, and the possibility of a decline in confidence is likely to occur. As a result, I have learned that this is only a very small element of motivating students in the classroom. If you find yourself stuck in the same position, one strategy that you can try is fostering a sense of competence. This means allowing the student to ask questions like, can I do this? Do I understand this? And motivating them to reach the final answer of yes, I can. This makes them more confident because the positive encouragement and motivation comes from within, not from the teacher. They know that the answer, yes, I can do this, is sincere. In recent research, I have learned about the peer coping model, which is essentially steering the struggling student towards his peer, who struggled but eventually succeeded. When the successful student reaches the point of understanding, it could be helpful to know the mental course that they took to reach the conclusion. By asking specific questions, we can recognize how the student overcame the challenge, and the struggler can try to follow the same mental path. In the classroom, this could be as simple as pairing up two students, one who previously struggled and one who is still having a difficult time. Together, they can ask questions, and the teacher can encourage questions to make sure they both reach that same ending point. Putting this idea together with class objectives and goals is an obvious conclusion that work together hand in hand. Ultimately, showing the students they have the ability to accomplish a goal could create the confidence needed for them to carry on. Recently, I've started to include lesson goals and objectives written on the board so that students know and understand what they have to do during that period of time. If they can gain confidence from reaching these goals, it would encourage them to push harder each time and hopefully create that student engagement that we're searching for. When it comes to student engagement, understanding the material presented is just half the battle. The other half is giving them the tools to attempt it. This is explained in the second strategy that I mentioned earlier, which is avoiding cognitive overload. Cognitive overload is an unmanageable amount of mental effort being used in the working memory. Put simply, when there's too much information presented to a person, they do not know where to begin or how to process the information systematically. If cognitive overload cannot be avoided, then the third strategy of cultivating meaningful questions would be the solution. In this strategy, we can break down the large amount of information and help the students to understand piece by piece. The primary reason that students loathe certain tasks and projects is because they cannot see the intermediate steps that they need to take in order to reach the final goal. Imagine a project from your school years. The teacher assigned you a pretty large project, but you had no idea how to get to that end result. This is the same problem that some of our students face on a daily basis. Even for what we feel is a simple discussion question, maybe they don't know how to come up with the answer. And maybe they're not sure if it's the answer the teacher is looking for. This idea made a great deal of sense to me as I experienced this situation firsthand. I instructed a group of students to complete a partner conversation activity in which they are given the details of a conversation to put into sentences themselves. In the beginning, we would go through each detail and turn it into a sentence together, followed by them merely repeating the sentences. With this method, I was essentially giving them the answers, and they were not thinking for themselves. Then, it was suggested by a superior of mine to try creating a table with the characters and details clearly listed on the board. I tried this method, allowing the students to fill in the details that they felt were the most important, going step by step, one character at a time. They could see the progression of the conversation much more clearly, and I was not giving them the answers. From this experience, as well as others, I believe using these three philosophies together can appropriately challenge, engage, and stimulate peer discussion, and encourage students to explore and refine their understanding of key concepts. Additionally, letting students know what is expected of them can give them a sense of accountability. It is up to the individual teacher to assess where the students need to go and find the right path to get them there. Keep in mind that effective questions are meaningful and understandable to students. Depending on the level and comprehension of a topic, students may be able to handle questions of various levels of difficulty. Effective questions challenge students, but are not too difficult. A good example is using a method such as this. Using a graph like this, the students are able to gauge how well they understand something, whether it's information that the teacher has given, or if it's a response to a question or discussion topic. Using this chart, the student is able to decide if they are confused, a little confused, or completely sure about the information they've received. The students can rate their confidence, and then, after using a combination of the strategies discussed today, the students can rate their confidence again. This can let the teacher know if they're asking the right questions to engage the student in the activity or discussion. This strategy does not always have to be used with a physical chart. The teachers can use this as a verbal check. Recently, I used this in one of my classes for a simple sentence, an answer that the student created using a vocabulary word. After writing the example on the board, I asked the student, "How positive are you that this answer is correct?" He answered, "I'm not so sure." But after error correction, asking questions to get to the right answer, and finally checking again, the student was confident in his sentence and confident in his answer. In conclusion, there are three things you want to remember when trying to enhance student engagement in your classroom. First, fostering competence. Try to get your student to say, "I did it," "I did a good job," or "I can do it." Remember, second, to avoid cognitive overload. Don't throw huge projects or tasks at your students, but rather break it down. Show them the intermediate steps that it takes to reach the conclusion. And finally, cultivate meaningful questions. If you're not asking why, then maybe the student doesn't know why either. Ask smaller, easier questions and build up to the more difficult ones. Everywhere we turn in life, there's misunderstanding and problems that arise due to miscommunication. Why not take these strategies out of the classroom? Try to apply them in your everyday life and make a new habit so that when you are in the classroom, it comes naturally, your own teaching strategy with your fully engaged class.